Hello and welcome back to Machynlleth 4mm. If you've been watching these videos in any sort of order, you'll know that I've been doing the ground cover in the lower yard for the last few weeks. There's a gap between the lower yard and the platform and the main yard area that needs grass on an embankment, and today I'm going to be addressing that grass. I want to do it as a separate video because it's a bit of a standalone on its own. I do it in a slightly different way for embankment grass. I do like using static grass on fields, but embankment grass, I've done this before on previous layouts, I like using this stuff. It's teddy bear fur. It's a very specific type of teddy bear fur which I've been trying to get hold of for a number of years now, and I finally found a supplier that's doing it in the UK, and it's called Wolf, and it's got a lot of undertones to it. It's, as you see, this sort of like goldeny colour at the moment, but when you apply green paint to it, it gives you a nice variation of sort of fresh green growth mixed in with dead grass, and it gives a really good effect to embankments. In the steam era, the embankments were actually well looked after. They were cut usually with a scythe rather than mechanically in those days. So we're trying to recreate that sort of mixed dead and fresh grass that's been roughly cut, and using teddy bear fur gives a really excellent result. It's a bit old-fashioned, and it may be something, if you don't have a static grass applicator, you want to look at, because this piece here cost me £15, and I think you'd probably struggle to cover an area of static grass that large for £15 without even the outlay of having a static grass applicator. So stay with me and I'll show you how I'm going to do it. So I should just add that I got this from a company called CRS Fabrics. I think they're based in Birmingham. I got it mail order. They seem to specialise in all sorts of teddy bear fur, soft animal fur, but this is the one that you want. It's called Wolf. There are a number of different sort of similar ones, slightly different colours, but it's definitely this one. I think it actually looks more like a lion than a wolf, but this is definitely the one that you want. So this area that's painted this sort of beigey brown follows all the way between the platform and lower yard area, all the way down to the signal box, and that's quite a good length to do, and it's the only bit in the main part of the layout that hasn't got some sort of scenic cover on. So when this is finished, it's going to really nicely tie everything together and start really looking like a layout from front to back. I did a test patch just to check that the colours were going to come out, because it's a long time since I bought that, and I wanted to make sure that it was still going to give me the same effect. I didn't brush this out as much as I should have done, so it's not quite there, but that's the sort of, the colour and effect that we're aiming for. Maybe a little less paint in there because it hasn't brought out the dead grass quite so much. So there are two ways you can do this. You can cut out your piece of teddy bear fur and glue it onto the area that you're going to do it, and then cut it short, and then apply the paint. But I found that to be incredibly messy, and you end up with little splats of green paint all over everything, and since I'm putting it into an area that's already got a lot of scenery around it, I don't want to do it that way. So I'm going to measure out and cut the piece of fur, take it off the layout, paint it separately on an area covered in newspaper, and let it dry, and then apply it, and then stick it down to the layout, so I'm not going to end up damaging all my nice scenery that I've spent a lot of time getting just as I like it. So this piece here is rather ungainly. It's a metre wide by 1.5 metres long, and if I start waving that around over the layout, I'm a bit worried that I'm going to start breaking things. So I'm going to cut a strip off. So with a decent pair of scissors, just going to cut a strip off. I should mention here that there's a grain to this, like any animal fur, you know, like stroking a cat or a dog, the fur lies down in a certain direction. So for doing something like an embankment with a long thin strip, cut perpendicular at right angles to the grain, so that when you lay it on the layout, you've got the grass stalks will be facing in an upward growing position, rather than, say, if you cut it the wrong way, your grass would end up growing sideways across the layout, and that's not an effect that we want to end up with. Right, there we are. We've got a much more manageable size piece here. Get rid of these fluffy bits off the edge where you've cut it. They can go in the bin. So now I can offer this up to the embankment area and cut it to size. So here we are. I'm just going to offer it up. Again, making sure that that grass is growing in an upward position. If you have a baseboard join, it's a good idea, like we have here, to start off there, because you don't want to stick this over your baseboard joins, obviously. So it's a bit cack-handed, this. I've borrowed some of my wife's very sharp haberdashery scissors here. Which will make the job an awful lot easier. But any decent pair of long, sharp scissors is going to do this job. Now I'm just sort of feeling in for the bottom of the embankment and sort of run scissors at the bottom of that line, and it's better to cut a little bit more than you need. Try not to break the signal. Probably thinking, why do I not just measure the embankment and cut a strip that way? It's because the embankment starts off much smaller down that end as this yard slopes in. So there we are, there's our first little bit that we need. I'm just going to tidy this little section up. So here we are. I've cut out all the rough outlines that I'm going to need all the way to end there. A few offcuts, don't get rid of those. It's a really good reason why we won't get rid of those. So now we're going to trim our grass to length, because this is a scale, well, probably 4 feet high. So I've got another pair of scissors I use especially for this job. It makes life easier, and it's a pair of curved surgeon scissors, which means you can get in and cut like that. I prefer to cut it because it gives it a slightly rough appearance. I've seen people just use a set of hair clippers, but I think that cuts everything at a much more uniform depth, or length, sorry. So I just like to get in, and this is messy. It just creates loads of fluff everywhere. It's a bit time consuming, but just getting in, not so short that you start seeing the backing through. If you do start seeing the backing through, it's no big problem. You can touch that up with a bit of sort of green flock for the final finish. You can start seeing the effect. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on trimming this and the other pieces back before the next stage. So as you're going along, I'm not sure whether you can see this, hopefully I've got the light on it. As I'm cutting all in one direction here, it's leaving these little ridges. Nothing to worry about. Just do a few cuts in the opposite direction to it, like this, and it breaks up those sort of lines that I'm getting. And I've got here, as you can see, I've been using it already. It's a brass suede brush, and if I just, you can use a toothbrush, an old toothbrush if you want as well. You just brush that out. That's got rid of those lines. So there we are. That's all trimmed back nicely. Just put it in place to see what it looks like. It's already starting to bring the layout together. For reasons that will become apparent later, I've got another little strip here which I'm going to do as an extra strip, and I'm going to cut this slightly longer than the other strips that have been stuck down, and I'll use this to cover up the edges of the material once it's all painted up and stuck down. Right, now for the messy bit. This is Precision Paints Doncaster Green. It's an enamel paint. It's what I've always used. I guess you could probably use acrylic paints to do this, but I've always found this works well. So I'm going to dilute this down just with some normal white spirit. I'll tell you what the sort of approximate ratios are once I'm happy with it, but it's usually, you know, very well thinned, but it's messy job. So old clothes, gloves, everything's covered in newspaper. So that is about 20% paint, 80% white spirit. I've just had a little test patch and that seems about right. So it's just a case of just scrubbing it in with an old brush. You really want to work it right into the fibres. And especially around the edge, you want to make sure that it's going to soak into the backing, because that can be quite visible. So I've done an area there. You'll find you get a lot of this stuff coming out of it, and then I've got an old toothbrush here, and just give it a good brush just to separate any fibres that I just want to sort of clump. So there you can see we're getting that nice sort of like green with a bit of a sort of a golden dead grass background to it. So after a lot of trimming and painting, I've now got all the bits of teddy bear fur that I need to do for the whole embankment and the whole layout, all the way down to there. It's ready to glue down, but what I've done is just in areas where the edges might be visible, I've just put some sort of more realistic earth colour where it might show through, including on areas where the baseboard joins will be, up underneath the edging of the platform, around the edge of the sort of sash at the side of the line. So it's now about time to start gluing this down. So no rocket science involved here, just a liberal coat of PVA. You want it nice and thick so it soaks into the backing of your teddy bear fur. And try not to glue the two halves of this baseboard joint together. Particularly want it nice and thick around the edges. You don't want it lifting up. Doesn't matter so much if it lifts up in the middle. Any funny little corners like this, just put a little bit of glue on the actual fabric itself. So with these bits we're coming to the edge and it's going onto an area that's got finished texture on it. It's better to put the glue on the fabric rather than put too much glue on the area and end up with a big glue smudge. hard-earned texture area. So there we are, there's one bit, and as you can see the baseboard joint isn't too visible. Don't worry if you can see little bits of the backing sticking out at the edges. We have a fix for that. I'm fully expecting to be able to see those. There's some bits here where it's overhanging the edge of the wall, so I'm just going to trim it back a bit so that we can hide the edge of the backing. Sorry, it's a bit shaky. I'm trying to hold the camera between my knees. So we'll leave that, a couple of millimeters there at the top of the wall, and then we can fill that in later. Better having it like that than having it overhanging the wall. So as you go around corners, there's a habit of bunching up a little bit and not wanting to stick down. So I just make a little cut. And I found it's even better with these curved scissors. Just take a tiny little wedge out like that. And then the ends will stick together, and that is pretty much invisible. So this is all stuck down nicely. But if you look closely at the edges, and I was expecting this, you can see little bits of the backing showing through. The edge at the top here is quite stark. Can't see the backing because it's hidden by the length of the grass, but it is there. If you remember back at the start, I cut off a spare piece, cut it longer than all the rest, and painted that. Now we're going to use that to create little tiny strips to fill in those gaps and hide those horrible edges. Right, so to do it properly, again, cut your little strip, probably about 5 millimeters wide. It's easier to cut it with the backing facing up because you can see what you're doing. So cut your little strip like that. It's a little bit scruffy actually, so I'm just going to trim this so that all the grass stalks are around the same sort of height. So this is the test bit that I did this morning, and I think now it's dry, it looks much better. So again, get some Mod Podge, peel back any bits of grass so that you can get at the area underneath. Put a liberal dose of Mod Podge on. Just how long do I need that bit? And then plant this upside down, so with the backing side facing up. Push it in nice and firmly. You don't want it so firm that the glue comes through into the backing, otherwise you'll never get the backing off. And just leave that alone, leave it to dry properly. So I've been round all the edges, I won't show you them all, and the ones I did at the start had time to dry now. So what we need to do is we just need to cut off this backing. This is where your curved scissors come into their own, really, being able to get in at the angle and cut flush to the layout. So yeah, and there we are. It's hiding that nasty bit of backing that was visible before. Just fluff it up a bit with the end of the finger, and it blends in nicely to the grass that's already there. So I've done the same all around these areas here, and you can see that the effect of the grass sort of spilling over the edge of the wall is excellent now. I'm not sure whether it's very apparent, but you can sort of see sort of lines where I've been cutting there. So and that's because I scraped it all or brushed it all flat while I was waiting for the encouraging the paint to dry and separate all the fibres. So just get in there with a toothbrush. We can stand them all up again now. Give that sort of nice sort of rough grass with some dead grass mixed in with it, and also gets rid of any of the little bits of offcuts and what have you that have got mixed in with it. And there we are. Rather pleased with that. So you may find there's some areas like this where the backing's showing through, and we can just hide that with a bit of scatter. You don't want to go too overboard on the scatter on an embankment, because the embankments are actually fairly well kept, especially in a station area. So we'll just have some, this is a fine wooden scenics, and I've got a few other sort of similar paley sort of like summery scatter colours, and I'm just gonna work that into any areas where I'm not happy with the finish. Just look at that. So a few random little spots so it doesn't look too obvious. And then our cheap firm holds hairspray. Start from a distance so that you don't just blow it everywhere. Found with this hairspray, it doesn't matter if it goes onto anything around it. It seems to dry the same without sort of tainting the colour. So there we are. So I'll carry on doing some little bits, hiding odds and sods here and there, and then I think we'll probably call this grass area done. So there we are, that just about finishes this video on teddy bear fur grass. I hope you found it interesting. I'm pleased with the results, and if you want a different texture than you get from static grass, this is a way forward. So thanks for watching. I've shot this as an interim while I've been doing a video on the rest of the lower yard. So if you haven't watched that already, you can go back and watch how I made the rest of the scenery in front of this embankment. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.